The Grand Arena of Nexus Prime held over 2 million spectators from across the galaxy. Species from 100 different worlds had gathered for the annual Galactic Games. The massive stadium floated in orbit around the neutral moon of Kethros, its transparent walls showing the endless black of space beyond. For 3,000 years, the Games had been the ultimate test of civilization. Every species sent their champions. Every species displayed their greatest cultural achievements. And every species watched the humans with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago. They were young. They were primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was borrowed, their ships were outdated, and their homeworld was a small blue marble on the outer edge of the spiral arm. The other species tolerated them, but nobody expected much from the newcomers. The Velthari, with their 4 arms and perfect reflexes, had won the Games for the past 8 centuries. The crystalline Zoreth had never finished below 3rd place in recorded history. The insectoid Kreen moved with mechanical precision that computers could barely match. And then there were the humans. Small, soft, fragile. They bled when cut. They broke when struck. They tired after mere hours of exertion. The betting pools across the galaxy gave them odds of 10,000 to 1 against even placing in the top 50. But the humans had insisted on competing. They had demanded the right to participate. And they had chosen the most dangerous event in the entire Games. The Chariot Race. The Chariot Race was not a simple competition. The track was 300 kilometers long. It wound through artificial terrain that shifted and changed during the race. Mountains rose from the ground. Rivers appeared without warning. Chasms opened beneath the wheels, and the vehicles were primitive by design. No engines, no computers, no shields. Just a simple platform, wheels, and whatever beast of burden the competing species chose to pull them. The Velthari used their famous war drakes, reptilian creatures the size of small buildings that breathed plasma and ran at speeds that broke the sound barrier. The Zoreth bonded with energy constructs that could phase through solid matter. The Kreen engineered biological machines that never tired and never failed. These were the champions of the galaxy. These were the creatures that defined power and speed across 1,000 worlds. The humans brought horses. The announcement had caused laughter across the galactic networks. Horses, simple quadruped mammals from Earth. Creatures that ate grass and ran on 4 legs like something from a primitive world. The bookmakers adjusted the odds to 50,000 to 1. The commentators made jokes about the humans finally understanding their place. The other competitors did not even acknowledge the human team as rivals. But Marcus Aurelius Chen stood in the preparation bay and ran his hand along the neck of Jupiter, his lead stallion. The black horse snorted and stamped its hooves against the metal floor. Behind him, the rest of his team prepared the chariot. It was built from earth oak, reinforced with titanium bands, and decorated with designs that came from an empire that had fallen 3,000 years before humans ever reached the stars. The wheels were wrapped in synthetic rubber. The platform was reinforced with carbon fiber. But the basic design had not changed in 2 millennia. The other species watched the preparation with amusement. A Velthari champion walked past and clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. His war drake snapped at the air and released a burst of blue flame. The horses did not flinch. They had been trained for this. They had been bred for this. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for this exact moment. The starting horn echoed across the arena. 147 chariots rolled to the starting line. The human chariot was barely visible among the massive vehicles of the other species. Jupiter and his team of 4 horses seemed like toys beside the war drakes and energy constructs and biological machines. The crowd murmured with anticipation. This was going to be a slaughter. Marcus wrapped the reins around his hands. His co-pilot, Sarah Kim, stood beside him with a long pole that would help them navigate the terrain. Behind them, Two more humans braced themselves against the chariot walls. This was the full human team. 4 soft creatures in a race against the galaxy's finest warriors. The second horn sounded. The race began. The first 10 kilometers were chaos. The war drakes surged forward with explosive speed. The energy constructs flickered and phased through the initial obstacles. The biological machines calculated optimal paths and executed them with perfect precision. The human chariot fell behind immediately. The crowd barely noticed them. They were watching the real race, the competition between the established powers. But Marcus did not try to match their speed. He held Jupiter and his team to a steady pace. He watched the terrain ahead. He studied the movements of the other competitors. And he waited. At kilometer 50, the first mountain range rose from the ground. The Velthari war drakes tried to climb it at full speed. 3 of them crashed into the rock face and tumbled down in flames. The Zorath constructs phased through the stone, but the effort drained their energy reserves. The Kreen machines calculated new paths, but the calculations took precious seconds. The human chariot found a pass through the mountains. It was narrow and dangerous, but Marcus had studied the arena designs. He had analyzed the patterns. He had prepared for exactly this obstacle. Jupiter led the horses through the gap, while the other species struggled with the unexpected terrain. By kilometer 100, the human chariot had moved from last place to 73rd. The commentators noticed. The crowd began to watch. The other competitors started to pay attention to the small vehicle with the primitive animals. The river appeared at kilometer 120. It was wide and fast, filled with rapids that would destroy any vehicle that tried to cross directly. The war drakes tried to leap over it. Some made it. Some did not. The energy constructs attempted to phase through the water and found themselves disrupted by the current. The biological machines calculated the probability of successful crossing, and many of them simply stopped. Marcus drove Jupiter directly into the water. The horses swam. It was something no other species had considered. Their vehicles were too heavy, their creatures too specialized. But horses had evolved in a world with rivers and lakes and oceans. They knew how to swim. They pulled the chariot through the current while the crowd watched in stunned silence. The water was cold and fast, but the horses kicked steadily and moved forward. By kilometer 150, the human chariot had moved to 31st place. The bookmakers began adjusting their odds. The commentators stopped making jokes. The other competitors started trying to interfere. A Velthari war drake turned and breathed flame at the human chariot. Marcus pulled hard on the reins and the horses dodged left. The fire missed by meters. Sarah swung her pole and deflected a piece of debris that would have taken out a wheel. The humans worked together with precision that rivaled the Kreen machines. The terrain shifted again at kilometer 180. The ground became sand, loose and deep and impossible for heavy vehicles. The war drakes sank to their knees. The energy constructs flickered and failed in the mineral-rich dust. The biological machines overheated as their gears clogged with particles. The horses ran on. Their hooves found purchase where others found only trap. Their lighter weight let them skim across the surface, while the larger creatures struggled and stopped. Marcus drove them forward without mercy and without doubt. By kilometer 200, the human chariot was in 8th place. The crowd was screaming. The commentators were shouting in disbelief. The betting pools had frozen because nobody knew what odds to give anymore. The final obstacle rose at kilometer 250. A massive wall of shifting stone, constantly moving, constantly changing. There was no path through. There was no way around. Every species would have to find their own solution. The Velthari war drake in first place tried to smash through. The wall shifted and crushed it against the rock. The Zorath construct in second attempted to phase through. The constant movement disrupted its energy patterns, and it collapsed into scattered light. The Kreen machine in third calculated 1,000,000 possible paths and found none that worked. Marcus did not stop to calculate. he did not stop to plan. He drove Jupiter forward at maximum speed. The horses screamed with effort. The chariot wheels sparked against the rock. And at the last possible moment, Marcus saw it. A gap. A single moment when the stones aligned and created a passage. It would only exist for half a second. He drove through. The chariot clipped the edge of the closing gap. The right wheel shattered. The platform spun wildly. Jupiter stumbled and the other horses crashed into each other. The chariot flipped and tumbled across the arena floor. Marcus was thrown from the platform. Sarah rolled across the stone. The other two team members hit the ground hard. The crowd gasped in shocked silence. 2 million spectators held their breath. The human chariot had crashed. The horses lay tangled in their harnesses. The vehicle was destroyed beyond repair. But the finish line was only 50 kilometers away. And Marcus Aurelius Chen was getting back up. He was bleeding. His arm was broken. His face was covered in dust and blood. But he walked to Jupiter and helped the stallion stand. He freed the horses from the ruined chariot. He wrapped the reins around his unbroken hand, and then he started walking. Sarah joined him. She was limping badly, but she took one of the other horses. The remaining team members, battered and broken, took the last two. They walked toward the finish line while the crowd watched in absolute silence. No one in galactic history had ever finished the race without a vehicle. No one had ever continued after such a crash. No one had ever refused to accept defeat so completely. The other competitors passed them. The race was over for the humans. There was no way they could win now, but they kept walking. Step after step, kilometer after kilometer. The first competitor crossed the finish line. It was a Valkyrie, the only one of their champions to survive the final obstacle. The crowd should have cheered. They should have celebrated. But everyone was watching the humans. The second competitor crossed. The third. The fourth. The race ended. The results were official. And still the humans walked. It took them 6 hours to cover the final 50 kilometers. They walked through the night while the arena lights dimmed and most species returned to their ships. But some remained. Thousands. Millions. They watched the 4 soft creatures from the primitive world put one foot in front of the other without stopping. Marcus crossed the finish line last. He was barely conscious. His team was holding each other up. The horses were exhausted beyond anything their species had ever experienced. They had not won. They had not even placed. By every official measure, they had failed. But the crowd that remained stood and applauded. The Valkyrie champion approached Marcus. He had won the race. He had defeated the galaxy. But he looked at the human with something that was not amusement anymore. It was respect. The next year, human entries in the Galactic Games increased from 1 to 50. The year after that, they won their first event. Within a decade, they were considered legitimate contenders. Within a century, they were champions. But no one ever forgot the chariot race. No one ever forgot the moment when 4 soft creatures refused to stop. No one ever forgot what it meant to be human. The galaxy learned something that day. Humans could be beaten. Humans could be broken. But humans could never be defeated. And that made all the difference in the stars.